Hi everyone and welcome back to the George Collection. I'm Rachel Rightside Blonde. Today marks the 125th episode of the George Collection. 125 is John Kennedy in Gematria. It's also time travel. Interesting. George is 57 in Gematria. Tesla is 57 in Gematria. So, do we have some elements of time travel or Tesla technology that have been used in these George magazines? A lot of people have been speculating about this. And I know it sounds far-fetched when you first hear it, but if we're really 100 years more advanced in technology than we are aware of, what are we capable of doing that we have no knowledge of? Interestingly enough, 47 is John in Gematria, but 47 spelled out comes to 125, which comes to John Kennedy. So 47, there's two different ways that can equal John. 47 equals John, but 47 spelled out equals 125. 125 equals John Kennedy. So that's kind of interesting too, that 47 is really important. And who's on the 47th cover of George magazine? None other than Donald Trump. For today's episode, I want to explore reasons why people think that time travel might have been used to create these George magazines. In other words, I want to explore the coincidences that have come true or just strange happenings in the George magazines that seem to have foretold some things that are happening even today. Probably the biggest one is the lung-attacking virus. That was in the Survival Guide to the Future. John Kennedy told us to put that magazine in a safe place for 20 years and pull it out. Why would he tell us to do that? And why would they pick 2020 for the year they were going to examine? Why not 2050? Why not 2010? It was 1997 when he made the magazine, so 2010 would seem relevant too. Why 2020? In that same magazine, John interviewed Bill Gates, who talked about privacy on the internet, and he talked about funding population control. Bill also told us what it would take to get the Patriot Act passed. Now, he didn't call it that, but he said after a period of heavy terrorism, people would be more likely to give up their freedoms. And my oh my, look what happened. John also put Richard Nixon on the first anniversary issue, which I found really interesting. I couldn't figure out why he would put this disgraced former president on the cover of his magazine. Until now we know why. I think the anniversary issues were really important because the first one was Richard Nixon, but the ones past that were the spy issue, looking into the CIA and corruption between the three-letter agencies, and that issue is one of my favorites. It is just chock full of amazing articles.
Morehouse joined the Army's deeply obscure remote viewing program, codenamed Stargate, a Pentagon and CIA venture from 1972 to 1995 that trained ultra-select individuals to transcend time and space. Such people would, Morehouse says, view persons, places, or things in time or space and gather intelligence information on the same. As a remote viewer, Morehouse undertook hundreds of missions. They included an astonishing attempt to go back in time to revisit Korean Airlines Flight 007 moments before it was shot down by Russian planes over the Sea of Japan. He was asked to find out if the plane really did have an intelligence gathering capability. Morehouse was also sent to inspect the burning oil wells lit by Saddam Hussein's Republican Army during the final days of the Gulf War to see if they were a cover for the release of toxic gases by the Iraqis. This is Q&A style, so I'll read the question and then I'll read Morehouse's response. The question was, tell me about the persons, places, or things you've visited. Here's an example. If there was a new Soviet fighter back in the Cold War days and we wanted to know what the aircraft's capabilities were, well, what better way of finding out than by augmenting all the other intelligence collecting platforms with remote viewers? We were asked to target the mind of the test pilot and glean the subtle nuances of what it's like to fly the aircraft. If it's sluggish, is there insufficient power in a steep banking turn? Next question says, it's several thousand miles to the nearest Soviet airspace. What was it like to get from here to there? When I made my separation from the physical body, I would fall through this tunnel of light, and I would feel myself falling and falling, and I wouldn't know whether I was up or down, losing all sight of everything I was in and what my orientation was. And then I would hit a membrane of some sort, pop through it, and find myself in the target area. Next question, and then you could view the target. The image of being there, it can be almost as clear as being in this room. Almost. Never quite as clear as sitting here right now. It's much more fleeting. It's obscured. It's like looking around in a dream state through a fog. Question, what made you a candidate for the Stargate program? I was a Ranger Company commander and I was training Jordanian Rangers when I was accidentally shot in the head by a machine gun. The round didn't penetrate my skull. It lodged in my helmet. But still, its kinetic energy was significant enough to knock me out for a considerable amount of time. While I was knocked out, I had the first of many visions. Question, how did you feel about this? Words of angels, the paranormal, ghosts, apparitions, these were definitely not within my worldview, and I had no lexicon to support what was happening to me. So I was a very troubled young man. Question, who actually recruited you for the Stargate program? The command psychologist of the Army Intelligence Unit I was assigned to at the time. He wasn't actively searching for individuals to feed into the Stargate program. However, when I presented him with my nightmares and experiences, he simply had to follow up and tell the Stargate management about me. Question, do other countries have remote viewing programs? The Czechs, the Chinese, the Russians. Ivan Sokolov, who was, according to Morehouse, head of the Soviet equivalent of Stargate, took the rest of his followers out of the Soviet remote viewing program and was hired by the Sony Corporation, allegedly as a research and development asset, but most assuredly as an industrial espionage asset. Question, how did the US program originate? We found out, and when I say we, I mean the US government, that the Soviet Union was heavily involved in paranormal research. The CIA then wanted to find out if there was any validity to it. They used hard physical science, not starry-eyed, new age guru, candle-burning, incense-burning, crystal-wearing stuff. What came out of this was, yes, people can see remote in time and space and can bring back relatively accurate data. Question, have you remote viewed since leaving the Army? You mentioned earlier that you believe TWA Flight 800 was accidentally brought down by a directed energy weapon, similar to a high-energy microwave, technology developed for the Star Wars program. The Navy admits that the USS Normandy, an Aegis-class missile cruiser, was 185 miles away at the time of the accident. According to other sources who have seen the actual satellite imagery, the Normandy was, in fact, 35 miles away. We also know that the plane blew up some 30 miles from Brookhaven National Laboratory and from a secret naval weapons testing facility that is adjacent to Brookhaven. The speculation we're working with is that the Normandy fired a target drone, which is why people on the shore saw this plume, this slow climbing missile arc through the sky. Then they fired up a high-powered shore-based microwave and zapped the aircraft, and oops, there was something between them and the target. Question, you and others learned this by remote viewing? Absolutely. All the remote viewers saw an invisible beam of light or energy strike this aircraft and bring it down. Question, one of the implications of your book is that good and evil actually exist. Have we lost sight of that? Very much so. We are at a crossroads in human history. The understanding of good and evil in our lives and in our decision processes as a human species has been blurred. That's what allows us in good conscience to build a military-industrial complex that profits from a $900 billion a year global defense industry, marketing death and destruction across the face of the planet.
When I first read that article and did that episode for the George Collection, it was the first time I'd ever heard of anything like remote viewing. So with that in mind, think of all the other things that we could do with our minds if we were allowed to. Think of all the things we could do with the technology that's probably being hidden from us as I speak. Think of all the hidden knowledge being kept from us for reasons of power and control. In some ways, I still think they very much still have control over our thoughts. And how do they do that? AI, bots. Think of all the fake accounts on Twitter that would sway a person's opinion. You get on there and you make a comment and you're immediately attacked by 20 bots. And then suddenly you think, wow, I am the minority. I think I'm probably the only person that feels this way. When in reality, everyone feels that way, but these bots are coming out and attacking you to make you think that you're the only one. Luckily, Elon Musk seems to be getting rid of those bots. There's still quite a few on other platforms, unfortunately, but that's how they control us. Through technology, that's how they control us. But that has been used for years and years and years. That's just one example of how they can manipulate what we think of present day events through their technology. But back to George Magazine, it seems like the people on the cover of George Magazine keep popping up randomly in the news, even today. And most of them for the same reason. They're speaking out against Donald Trump. They're speaking out against the Republican Party. Now, are they all Democrats? Is every single one of them a Democrat? Or are perhaps they showing us another form of control that has been used against us, which is that of Hollywood? Do they all really love Kamala that much? Or is there something deeper to this? There were 57 total issues of George. Again, there's that number again, 57. Gematria is George, it's Tesla, and there were 57 issues total. The last George magazine came out in the spring of 2001, just before 9/11, but that was good timing because the internet was on the rise and people were learning that they could communicate with each other and get information out directly to each other through the internet. As we've found out, however, the internet can be changed. What cannot be changed is printed magazines. They're preserved forever. So what I find very interesting on the Survival Guide to the Future is that it says, live forever, love your job. What does that mean exactly? Is it telling us that in the future we're going to live forever and we're going to love our jobs? It certainly just seems like a very odd headline to put on the Survival Guide to the Future, right? For 2020 of all years, 2020, not 2010, not 2050, but 2020, the year of the lung-attacking virus. You guys, I have spent a lot of time trying to put together an accurate timeline of what happened from 1995 through 1999. And this includes the Biden letter, this includes the death threats, this includes the George magazines, the titles on the George magazines. 1999 to be specific, with headlines like Why Hillary Won't Be Senator and Hillary Comes Clean later on that year. You just can't make this stuff up, and it seems like it was put there on purpose. So I really hope at some point I'll have the true answer, but right now it's all speculation, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of exactly what happened. From 1995 to 1999, what the heck happened? On the topic of time travel, someone recommended a book by Stephen King. Yes, I know Stephen King is Stephen King. But this book is called 11/22/1963, and it's about President Kennedy's assassination. And it's talking about time travel, about this guy going through a portal. And I haven't read the entire book yet, but the premise is rather mind-blowing. So I'm going to be reading this book, and I'll tell you guys what I found out. But there's all these different aspects, and of course we know that they have to tell us what they're going to do or tell us what happened, and maybe that was him telling everyone what really did happen. I just did it. I need a tinfoil hat. As you can see, there are plenty of instances where one would be completely justified asking, man, how did he know that this was going to happen in the year 2020? How did he know to put that in the magazine in 95 or 97 or 99? How did he know? Did he know the plan, or was it something more? And before I leave, I want to share this with you because the thought of time travel is still a little out there for me, okay? Someone told me this: if time travel were to exist in the year 2070, let's say that in the year 2070, we discover that time travel exists. If that's the case, then it exists now too, right? That does it for this episode of the George Collection. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.
Of this extraordinary magazine, George, which is a hoot of a magazine. I thought you were a lawyer.
I was.
What happened?
Well, we decided, actually taking a cue from folks like yourself and you around the 1992 election, that there was an opportunity here to change the definition of a political magazine. Certainly the way Americans were accessing information about politics and politicians was changing. Candidates were appearing on late night talk shows, on talk radio, on sitcoms, and there was a kind of a leveling process, and while the rest of media clearly had caught up with that, we felt that political magazines per se hadn't.
Your mother was a hell of an editor at Doubleday.
That's what I hear.
Would she have liked George?
I think she would have.